And now, without further ado, the resolution on the table tonight is resolved. President Trump is making America great again. I call this debate to order, and I am looking for a speech in the affirmative. For our first speech, I'm looking for Anne Bradeen. Do we have Anne?
Yes,
All
I'm
right.
here.
The floor is yours, Anne. You have 4 minutes.
All right. Thank you very much to everybody who's here listening and speaking. President Trump is making good his promises, and they will be good for all of us. Common sense told us, in President Trump's words, that if we didn't have a border, we didn't have a country. The borders had to be secured, and I think most Americans, the ones who would admit it anyway, have known this for years. Previously, the local police, ICE, and Homeland Security were handcuffed by federal and state policies. Criminal charges against immigrants were not being filed or written down for fear of legal backlash. Uncontrolled immigration has adversely affected many aspects of our economy. Through his executive orders, President Trump has stopped the flow and called our attention to the abuses of birthright citizenship, the need for e-verify in employment, and the need for proof of citizenship to vote. Common sense also told us that if we don't have our own domestic manufacturing, we'll be at the mercy of foreign nations. President Trump's tariffs pointed out just how unfair trade policies have been to the United States. Whether and how much tariffs are actually implemented, the very threat has brought us significant manufacturing and already. Tariffs have also given Trump bargaining power with countries in the Middle East. Tax cuts in the current budget will allow companies to maintain capital for innovation, growth, and employee incentive retentions. One executive order specifies that education funding be directed to technical and AI training programs, which will prepare students of all ages to work on and alongside the robots. People can make good lives from 8 to 5 manufacturing jobs that do not require college educations. Tax cuts and smaller government will increase their discretionary spending. Small and large businesses will benefit. Finally, common sense told us that we must unleash American energy for our own security. Our energy can be a revenue-producing, exportable commodity. President Trump started with taking regulations back off oil, gas, and coal to fuel new economic growth and our current power needs. Science and our concern for the environment will lead to innovative and renewable power sources in the near future. Technology and infrastructure demand immediate power sources. President Trump does have a vision for our country. I can only demonstrate a small part of a total and complete plan here. All the parts are addressed by the 142 executive orders. I have hope and faith in his vision. I pray for us to have the long view. As a public, if we can support the possibilities, have patience, and work together, we can be a stronger, more resilient country again, even though the man leading us may be flawed, as we all are. Thank you.
Jazz hands for our speaker. Now I see some people know how this works. Raise your hand, your Zoom hand, if you wish to ask a question of curiosity. Please keep them brief. And to our speakers, I also ask that you try to answer concisely. There's no time limit, but I'll try to hurry us along if we get stuck. So for our first question, let's go to Robin.
Hi, I'd like to ask the speaker, when was America not great?
To our speaker.
America's always been great, but we have been better for our own people. We have been better at other times for our own people.
Thank you to our questioner and speaker. Let us go to Grace.
I wonder if the speaker would address the cuts to there's about a few hundred people that are working to give out loans for new energy sources, because the speaker was talking about energy, U.S. energy, and so there's loans for various nuclear power, for example, and they're really struggling to give out more loans due to cutting the number of people there. I wonder if the speaker would address that.
Thank you.
Um, I saw President Trump's his own 100 days talk on TV last night, where he had all the businesses in the room that are coming into the country. Some of those businesses are going to be allowed to have their own power sources or to make their own power sources. And I have every confidence that those companies are going to know what's going on in terms of innovation, and that they can provide the economics to get those different innovative energies going.
And for one more question, let's go to Robert.
Yes, Madam Chair, does the speaker realize that the tariffs will raise the cost of all products for Americans and affect our economy in the way that most Americans disdain?
That's the part that President Trump has told us from the very beginning, that we are going to have some pain. And that's the part that I hope people in this country will take the long view about, and support I think President Trump is using these tariffs for more than just making us money. I think they're a threat as much as anything else. They're a bargaining tool, and that it's going to wash out eventually, if we can just all be patient. You know, it's only been 100 days, and I think a lot has been done so far that all put together is going to be good for this country. Thank you for the question.
Thank you to our questioners and our speaker. I see all of those hands that are up. I jot down hands that I don't call on. You'll see we can't call on everyone, but keep raising them. I noted that I didn't get all of you. So, all right, we are now moving on to our first speaker in the negative. For that, I am looking for Joseph Dragone. Forgive me for not saying that right. Do we have Joseph?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Yes. I believe that historians will label Donald Trump as one of the worst American presidents ever. However, I do believe he is correct when he says we need to make America great again. Where Donald Trump and I disagree is in our definition of what it would mean to be great. America is more than a country, it's an idea. As Ronald Reagan said at the conclusion of his presidency, a person can move to France or Germany or Italy, but never truly become a Frenchman or a German or an Italian. America, on the other hand, is a place where an immigrant can become an American. All that is necessary is to embrace the ideal that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Since our founding, the definition of men who can enjoy these rights has expanded from property-owning white men to men and women and people of color and LGBTQ people and disabled people. The election of Donald Trump marked a turning point in our society. The definition of the men who can enjoy these inalienable rights seems to have narrowed again. Now men are apparently defined as white Christian billionaires. We somehow have forgotten that other than the Native Americans from whom we stole much of this land, we are all descendants of immigrants. We are now in the process of purging from our midst many of the immigrants that were drawn to our shores, tired and hungry and yearning to be free. The kidnapping and incarceration in foreign prisons without any due process of immigrants who have committed no crime is a sign that we have lost our way as a country. As J.B. Pritzker has said, today it is an immigrant with a tattoo. Tomorrow it could be a citizen with a Facebook post that annoys Trump. Donald Trump has surrounded himself with sycophants whose only qualification is their professed loyalty to the dear leader. Paraphrasing J.B. Pritzker again, we have a Secretary of Transportation who hates public transit, an Attorney General who hates the Constitution, a Secretary of Education who hates teachers, a leader of Doge, himself an immigrant who has made billions of dollars as a result of energy tax credits granted to his company by the government, who wants to cut the social safety net for the middle class in order to fund tax breaks for himself and his billionaire friends, a president who hates our military so much that he calls them losers and suckers, and who can't be bothered to delay his golf game to greet the bodies of 4 fallen U.S. soldiers. A Secretary of Health and Human Services who stuffs a dead bear in the back seat of his car and then promotes conspiracy theories about vaccines while hundreds of children are needlessly infected with measles. And a national security team to whom we entrust the nuclear codes, but who can't be trusted to organize a group chat.
30 seconds.
These are some of the things we need to fix in order to make America great again. Trump is making America sick again by cutting funding to the National Institutes of Health, stupid again by dismantling the Department of Education, poisoned again by weakening the Environmental Protection Agency, hungry again by cutting SNAP funds and literally taking food out of the mouths of children, scared again by empowering ICE agents to kidnap people off the street, weak again by dissolving our bonds with our NATO allies,
Last thought,
again
please.
by imposing tariffs that disproportionately affect the middle class. Although I am disheartened by the damage Trump has done in just 100 days, I am hopeful because I know this experiment we call America has survived for 250 years through civil war, global conflicts, pandemics, economic depressions, racism, and sexism. We can make America great again, but it will take a concerted effort by all of us to do it.
And with that, our speaker is thanked. Let us go to questions of curiosity. I would like to hear from Ryan.
Hello. So I would like to ask the speaker, when the speaker said that we no longer have sort of equal rights for everybody, but for the upper class white people, can the speaker give some examples of some of the rights that Americans, non-Christians, poor people like me, who is a poor non-Christian, and even some of my friends who are gay, LGBT, Hispanic, Black, women, what rights does the speaker think that they no longer have as a result of Trump being in office?
To our speaker.
Yes, thank you for the question. Due process is the basis of our country. And due process has been trampled upon by the Trump administration. There are people who are literally kidnapped off the street, American citizens who are put in foreign gulags. That, to me, is a deprivation of rights.
Let us go now to Gabriel for a question of curiosity.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And hello, everybody. I'm coming from Charlotte, North Carolina. Madam Chair, can you please ask the speaker? There was many things they said that I disagree with, but since you want to be succinct in only one, I would love to ask the speaker, when they made their comment about abolishing the Department of Education, they said something to the fact that it would, and this was a statement, not a question. He said it would make America, or is making America, dumb again. So my question is, Argentina recently abolished the Department of Education, amongst other things, and has the best economy they've had in over 2 decades, even more, I think, actually. So my question is, was that statement 100% certain, or were they are they is it like 70%, 80%? I just want to understand.
Level of certainty.
Yeah.
Okay, to our speaker.
Thanks.
100% certain. And my thinking is that the demolition of the Department of Education and the result of funds being funneled to states without the regulations that the Department of Education imposes will result in money being funded into voucher programs, to private schools, and the decimation of the public education system, which is the basis on which citizens need to participate in our democracy.
And for one more question, let us go to Kathleen McGill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to ask Madam Chair, I'd like to ask the Speaker if there's a distinction between individuals coming to the United States legally versus illegally, and sort of the rights that they would carry beyond entering. I'm curious about that.
Your speaker.
Thank you for the question. Yes, there is a difference. I believe that people should come to this country legally. I believe, however, that people who come to this country for asylum should be considered, should be given due process. I believe that everyone who comes to this country, legally or illegally, should be treated as a human being. There is no such thing as an illegal person.
Thank you to our questioners and to our speakers. All right. Let us go now to a speech in the affirmative. For our next speech, we will go to our previous questioner, Ryan Ruffiner. Ryan, you have 4 minutes.
Hello, thank you. One of the things that might distinguish me from a number of other Trump supporters, and certainly from the stereotypes, is that up until about 3 years ago, I used to be a progressive liberal. I was a progressive liberal to the point where I volunteered on the Beto O'Rourke campaign, block walking, calling people, participating in strategy phone calls, and then I did a little bit on the Bernie Sanders campaign and the Biden campaign. Now I have voted for Donald Trump after voting against him twice, and I do believe that he is making America great again, although perhaps not in a 10 out of 10 way. Like if I was to give him a number rating with 5 being in the middle, I'd be probably a 6.5 out of 7, all right? I recognize he's a very flawed person. He often says things that are outlandish, exaggerated, egotistical, and so forth. But I also try to think about who I would rather have in charge of, a business I'm working at, a ship that I'm sailing on, whatever it is. I would rather have somebody who gets the job done, even if they're a bit of a, pardon my French, an asshole. And he has gotten a lot of things done, in my opinion. He got the border under control very, very quickly. That was something that when I was a Democrat, I was told was not a problem. It was not happening. And then when it was happening, we were told that it was actually being taken care of very well. And it turns out that that wasn't true. Now we have a strong border again. And as one of the previous speakers, I believe, mentioned, without a strong border, you don't really have a country. And I could compare that to the same way that you don't really have much of an immune system as a person if you don't have the border of your skin protecting you. Donald Trump also made good on his promise to ban DEI, which I, as a DEI researcher, view as the largest form of systemic racism and discrimination our country has seen in decades. I have had many people I know who've been discriminated against because of it. I've been discriminated against because of it. I also saw Donald Trump support Israel and Jewish college students on campus in a way that I had been waiting for years for my Democratic colleagues and politicians to do, and it didn't happen. We had Jewish college students who were attacked physically and verbally on college campuses, and all I saw were people making excuses. Donald Trump did not make excuses. He said, first and foremost, Hamas is evil. There is no moral equivalency between Israel and Hamas, and we need to recognize it as such, and we're not going to treat Hamas nicely. I respect that, I like that, and I agree with that. I also say when it comes to the Department of Education, I used to believe that the Department of Education was incredibly important. I don't believe that anymore, partially because most of the people I talk to don't believe that the education system in America is doing a great job. There are a lot of people who think, well, my students are sitting for 8 hours a day in a classroom. They're doing homework, which we have known for decades doesn't contribute to learning. They're waking up and getting to school way too early for them to be completely awake. They're being fed crappy food that we wouldn't even feed to prisoners. We're not doing a good job with our public education system. So at the very least, I think the Department of Education needs to be reformed, if not gotten rid of completely. What I also see as a private tutor is that private institutions and charter schools are doing a much better job of educating people across diverse categories of people. All that to say, I know that Trump is not perfect. I don't adore the guy. I know he's flawed, and there's a lot of things he's done that, frankly, I don't care about. I live
30
on the
seconds.
Okay. Thank you. I live on the Gulf of Mexico. I don't care that it's been renamed the Gulf of America. I am skeptical and cautious about the tariffs, but I also recognize that we've got to wait longer than 100 days to see the full effect of those tariffs. Thank you.
You're our speaker. Okay, questions of curiosity. Let's go to Nancy. Nancy, you're on mute.
Okay, Madam Speaker. Yes, my question to the speaker is does he know of areas such as our rural area in Oregon where the public system is the most important, public education system is the most important and best quality we have in our areas? So I guess the question is, does he assume that because the public education, his experience is not good, how are they supposed to be educated if not with a public system along with a private system?
You're our speaker.
Yeah, that's a good question. So again, my first priority would be to reform the public education system. In some ways that I know certain other people on my side of the aisle, so to speak, would not agree with. For example, I think making a secondary language should be mandatory. In my case, I think in Texas, it should be Spanish because that's one of the most commonly spoken languages here and around the world. I would also like to see coding classes, media literacy classes, classes that aren't just rote learning that used to be acceptable several decades ago when we were sending people mostly to factories. Our education system is based off the Prussian model that was supposed to prepare people for working in factories. I think it could be a lot better. The public education system, when I talk about how it could be better, I'm not just talking about Texas or my personal experience. I'm wrapping this up, don't worry. I'm also talking about how far America lags behind globally as an entire country. I want to make the public education system better, not just in my state, but overall.
Okay, thank you for that. Let us go now to Cleveland, Canova. Looking to unmute there. We got it? Cleveland, I'm going to come back to you.
Yeah.
I'm going to take one other.
Here.
Oh, are you okay? Great.
Great.
Safe.
Then,
All right.
Madam Speaker, yes, I'd like to ask the Speaker about if there was a crisis at the border, and I think any clear-thinking American wants there to be a secure border. why did President Trump stop a bill in February of 2024 that was bipartisan, that was the most stringent and wide sweeping border bill since 1999, if it was a crisis and could wait until he was president in 2025?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time? When was the bill put up for?
The bipartisan bill, the border bill that
Mm.
was written by both sides of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, was the most comprehensive since 1999. Border security, more agents. It was agreed upon as the most wide sweeping rather bill since 1999. But Donald Trump told his people in Washington to stop, don't pass the bill. I need that issue to run for president. If it was such a crisis, why could it have waited another year until he was in office to address it?
Yeah. So the specifics of that bill, I will say right off the bat, I don't know. I don't talk about the specifics of any bill unless I've dug into it and read the actual things. So for example, there was one bill that I read about a while ago where there's a news report saying that this college is banning divisive topics, and they made it sound like this was just anything that could be controversial. It turns out that the divisive topics were things like, we're not going to segregate our students, not teach them about segregation, but actually segregate them. And we're not going to teach people that some people are inferior or superior based on their race. So when it comes to reports like this, I would have to look at the actual bill in and of itself. I also don't think that Donald Trump had said, don't do that because I want to run on this. I mean, we might be able to infer that, but I'm not going to. I don't know. It could also be that it just wasn't a very good bill and they thought it was the best that they were going to get. But he thought, I'm such a good deal maker, I can get a better deal. I mean, and maybe he's right. Maybe he's just being egotistical. I don't know.
All right. And for one final question for this speaker, let's go to Lori. And I do see all your hands up again. Thank you for your interest. Lori, can you unmute?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank
Madam
you.
Speaker.
Mhm.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to ask the Speaker, he states 2 points. He states that Donald Trump is a quote unquote asshole. As someone who grew up in the great state of New York, it's very clear the history of Mr. Trump and how he conducts business and has gone through many iterations of business challenges.
Coming to a question.
So the question is, when and how has it become okay for us to overlook the morality of business and our politicians? My second point goes to what was just discussed regarding the
Just
bill.
1 point, please. Let's go. The morality of business. Excellent question.
Okay, thank you.
Let's send that to our speaker.
Okay. Yeah, the morality of business. So that was one of the things that when I was a liberal, I had the most dislike for, because I was like, he's kind of a dick. He's very rude. He's very brash. I didn't like that. But the more history I read, not of America, not Donald Trump, but of just leaders throughout history, every single one of them is flawed. If we said, well, we shouldn't talk about how great Martin Luther King was because he cheated on his wife, we would be omitting a great figure in history because of a big, serious moral flaw. Just about every figure throughout history would have some kind of massive moral flaw that makes them worthy of not listening to. I would also rather have, if somebody's going to be bold and brash and successful doing it, I would rather have them on our side. The last point I'll make about that is in looking at certain figures throughout history, some of them are very unpredictable. And at the time, it caused a lot of chaos. But in hindsight, it kept their enemies on their toes.
And with that, our speaker and questioners are thanked. And I know sometimes you guys catch it. I'm in Montgomery County, Maryland, not at the large building just south of me where there is a Madam Speaker. But I won't correct you, but I am Madam Chair, not Madam Speaker. So with that, let us go to our next speaker in the negative. I am looking for Beth Bauer. Beth? You have 4 minutes. The floor is yours. Do we have Beth Bauer?
Beth is muted.
Oh, and I don't see her popping up.
She's speaking, but she's
Beth,
muted.
you are, can you unmute Beth?
I just did.
Thank you.
Okay. First of all, I am an other. I'm neither red or blue, but I believe America is great and the world viewed America as great well before Trump. Yes, there are always ways we can improve, but Trump didn't need to tear America apart and create chaos at home and abroad, the world to try to make us great again. To show this, I am using two main facts to support this position. First, historically after World War II, we were leaders in forming NATO and the United Nations because the US was isolationist after World War I. We wouldn't join the League of Nations, nor did we enter World War II even after Pearl Harbor was bombed. And only after Germany and its allies declared war on the US did we enter World War II. But by that time, most of Western Europe had already fallen, and there was almost no one left to fight with us. We learned that we are only as strong as our strongest allies. We must respect and protect our allies and partners. Secondly, I want to say there is a big difference in leadership between running your own business, where your goal is to build and protect your own pocketbook and perhaps your own ego, versus running a country or an organization where your responsibility is to care for all of your constituents. I've done both, and I can honestly tell you that the difference in leadership between running a country and a business is like night and day. Finally, tonight, I will discuss just two big issues where I do agree with Trump, but I totally disagree with his handling of them. Like his treating the United States as his own business, so he can handle issues however he wants, rather than as a country with constituents for whom he is responsible, and in a world that trusted us and looked to us for leadership. The first issue I'll discuss is our federal deficit and reducing the cost of government. As a former economics major, I know that our deficit must be fixed. Social Security itself will go broke in a little over 10 years if there aren't changes. Clinton and Gore did an actual audit of the departments, the positions, and the economics of each for a respectful, smooth government downsizing, whereas Trump and Musk's Doge mass firing approach was reckless and dangerous for the country, where we are now trying to hire back key people. We are losing important research that's partially paid for, and many veterans are left high and dry after serving our country, in addition to many other areas. Second, I'll discuss is the issue of tariffs. I know that tariffs around the world need to be rebalanced. I say this as someone who lived in Japan and worked at Toyota corporate headquarters. When I was there, the Japanese were truly laughing at us about how quickly they were setting up Toyota dealerships in the United States in the 1970s, when you couldn't even see one American car in Japan. Then I explained to my marketing department that it's all about tariffs. Most economists agree that tariff negotiations can and should be done gradually by increasing the tariff rates by 2, 3, 4% a month until mutual agreements are reached, not by smacking our allies and the world with huge amounts and expecting negotiation afterwards, like we are their superiors, not partners or allies.
30 seconds.
Okay. Trump's actions have not only created chaos for the US and the world, but we are alienating our allies and trading partners. As proof, some of our trading partners are actually now negotiating with China, and in Canada, they just elected a new prime minister who is down in the polls by 24% at year end, but won by a landslide with a stance against Trump. The US, our democracy in the world, is not as great since Trump's first 100 days. Thank you.
Thank you to our speaker. I will now go to questions of curiosity. Do I have questions for our speaker? There we go. Okay. Let us go to Tom Cook.
Madam Chair, question for the speaker. What is the speaker's thought on these countries that are going to China for deals? Do you think that China is going to be a good partner?
Does the speaker think?
Yeah, does the speaker think that China would be a good partner versus the US, or the US would be a better partner?
Okay, to our speaker.
Well, if we are going to slap these huge tariffs on them, and it's very unpredictable, we don't know how, we don't know when, China may be much more reliable in terms of being a partner than we are.
Okay. For another question, let's go to Clark.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was very interested by the speaker's invocation of an experience in a major corporation. And I'm wondering if the speaker might reflect on that experience in a major corporation that may have gone through a significant restructuring, which is a practice that is commonplace in the corporate world and can often result in the determination, development of efficiencies and the savings of costs. I'm wondering if the speaker might compare corporate restructurings and the method that the administration is now using to try to find efficiencies and weigh in on her thoughts on that current method.
To our speaker.
Okay, so you're asking me, it's a little unclear. You want to know how I would compare corporate restructuring to the way Trump is handling the tariffs? Is that what
May I
I'm?
clarify,
Questioner?
Madam Speaker?
Is that, yeah.
I actually am drawing more attention to the strategies of the Doge project as a means to identify savings and efficiencies, and how that might be compared to corporate restructurings in a private sector business.
Well,
do you have a point of view on those different approaches?
I can tell you that when Clinton had Gore do this, it went through Congress, it went into each of the departments. They met with people within the departments to ask them, where are the improvements? What can we do? What are we doing wrong? What can we do better? Where do we need cuts? And they asked them. They didn't just go in and mass lop people off. And they were successful. Why didn't we follow a successful downsizing? It could have worked.
And for one final question, let's go to Karen.
I too worked for Toyota Corporate, and when they made the decision to transfer their corporate offices from LA to Plano, Texas, they spent years making that decision. They hired researchers to say, what would they benefit? What would they lose?
You have a question for the speaker?
So my question is, when you talk about
when the speaker talks
about corporate restructuring, what I'm asking is, where was the decision making so we could all hear it? And as we did in Toyota, we looked at it, we heard it, we talked about it, and we made decisions after there was a lot of input so that they were good decisions. So do you think
does the speaker
think
think
the current administration is not doing due diligence? Yes, he might be wanting to reorganize, but are we getting due diligence?
You answered my question. No, we are not getting due diligence, and this is very reckless. If you're running your own business, you know what? You figure I can come back and fix it. But when you're running a company, country, you don't just come back and fix things. You've already destroyed people's lives and you've got to be more respectful for how you restructure. And Toyota is very, very conscientious when they restructure. I can tell you that.
All right. Thank you to our questioners and our speaker.
Can I add one more thing? When I was there, I was very highly regarded, and Mr. Toyota himself gave me the tour of the Toyota plant in Japan.
That'd be an interesting tour.
That's my ending comment.
Excellent, excellent place to end as we go to our next speaker in the affirmative. I'm looking for a speech in the affirmative from Anthony Robinson. Do we have Anthony?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as a purple sort, I see much to support either side of this resolution, but hey, it's a debate. So I will focus on just one area where I see President Trump moving in the right direction to make America great again. If we go back to the days of the founding fathers, just after this country attained its independence from Britain, many decades before the Mexican-American War, say, they were faced with this exciting new experiment involving liberty, a search for new principles of governing that would bind separate states into one union, and ambitious drives of expansionism, exploitation, and conquest had not grown too large yet. I believe that in a couple of his major policy shifts, shifting from previous policy, Trump has departed from the spirit of conquest that's permeating American militarism displayed by his predecessors, and thereby brought us a few steps closer to that greatness of an America more focused on that experiment in liberty than conquest. I'm referring to Trump's serious attempts to negotiate a peace with Russia and with Iran, rather than flirt with a nuclear holocaust, the way I believe his predecessor did. I believe this sets him somewhat apart from the corrupt military establishment that his predecessors kowtowed to. And that's an extraordinary accomplishment. In terms of the Iran policy that Trump is departing from, General Wesley Clark described a plot hatched by neocon planners in 1991, Paul Wolfowitz and all, that was aiming to destroy the governments in 7 Mideast countries: Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran, in order to destabilize the Middle East, turn it upside down, make it under our control. 6 of those countries have been regime changed, and only Iran remains. I think it was clear that Trump wanted to show strength to Iran, but in the end, he didn't take the drastic step of bombing their nuclear facilities that would have required an atomic bomb to pull off, from my understanding. In terms of the Russia-Ukraine policy that Trump is departing from, and he really does seem clearly determined to make peace with Russia on this war. The Cato Institute has said both the Obama administration and most of the American news media portrayed the Euromaidan revolution of 2014 as a spontaneous popular uprising against a corrupt and brutal Ukrainian government. But the extent of the Obama administration's meddling in Ukraine politics was actually
30 seconds.
Breathtaking. Thank you. Russian intelligence intercepted and leaked to the international media a phone call from Assistant Secretary in the State Department, Victoria Nuland, in which she and our ambassador to Ukraine discussed in detail their preference for specific personnel in a new post-Yanukovych government. I rest.
Thank you to our speaker. Okay, perfect timing. Let's go for our first question to Joanna Hoyt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Speaker has commended President Trump's departure from U.S. Conquest and militarism. I have some sympathy with this, but how does the Speaker then take into account President Trump's escalation of the existing U.S. support for an Israeli assault in Gaza that, whatever one thinks of the inciting incident, has now led to massive civilian casualties, including children, and to mass starvation, and to Trump's discussion of just wiping out the indigenous population there and creating a new Riviera, perhaps, or to Trump's threatening language toward, say, Greenland? What of the military adventures Trump still appears to support?
Our Speaker.
Well, I appreciate the question. The short answer would be touche, touche. I took on a modest claim here. I would point out that the two examples I gave are of great importance. Your examples certainly.
The questioner's examples.
The questioner's examples certainly, in the case of the Israeli Gaza issue, I could only speculate what his motives are. Every now and then he seems to come out on the right side, and negotiate a peace deal between Hamas and Israel. But it's very inconsistent. So I give you a touche there. And on Iceland, it's too hard to decipher. It's the first step in a business deal of sorts, and I'd be speculating to say more than that. So I stand by my two examples as so important that I'll just admit the point on the others.
Always a fair thing to do in a Braver Angels debate. So with that, let us go to John Siegel.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I'd like to know what the Speaker thinks about the following. Russia attacked Ukraine. Trump has not expressed good support for Ukraine. We don't have any soldiers on the ground. We have only provided equipment. We know from history that Russia is likely to follow up with further attacks. So how would that be justified?
Your Speaker.
Thank you for the question. This is exactly how Russia and Putin are portrayed. I understand it's hard to see it differently for a lot of people who haven't gone beyond sort of mainstream media and done a little digging. But the U.S. has nefarious interests here, I'm afraid. And Putin's record, he gave us plenty of red lines not to cross, like, allowing Ukraine to join NATO, which, would we allow that kind of thing to go on in Mexico with Russian partners? We had the Cuban Missile Crisis. We took a stand. No, that's not acceptable. We won't have missiles in our backyard. Well, what has Putin said? We won't have, threats in our backyard, and we have a long border to protect. He made that so clear. But our country, for over a decade, has been trying to, creep up on Russia militarily in that way. So I don't think there's any evidence that Putin is an expansionist. This was a matter of existential survival that he was responding to.
And for one final question, let's go to Anne Vargo.
Yes, Madam Chair, my question for the speaker relates again to the Ukraine-Russia situation. And I am wondering if the speaker feels that Trump can bring about a lasting peace between those two countries, and what would he like to see that peace look like? How does he think such a peace could work? And should Zelensky and Putin be involved in the discussion together?
To our speaker, excellent question of curiosity.
Thank you for the questions. To the second question, it's pretty hard to get constructive dialogue with Putin and Zelensky in the same room. I think I think he recognizes that. As far as what it would look like, you know, we only know so much. We see he keeps the negotiation alive with great determination. That's going through Steve Witkoff, and he makes comments every now and then to kind of prod either Zelensky or Putin to try to get them in a negotiating mood. What would it look like? I think it would probably look more like what Putin is asking for than what Zelensky is asking for. I think Zelensky is a kind of tortured man who is between a rock and a hard place, and there are forces around him in the military that will not allow him to act freely.
And with that, our speaker and questioners are thanked. Okay, guys, we'll do one more speech in the negative before a quick break, and then we're going to shorten speeches, probably. All right, for our next speech in the negative, we will go to Susan Lindsay. Susan.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm arguing in the negative that Trump is not making America great again. When Trump won the election, I genuinely gave him the benefit of the doubt. Many of his concerns were my concerns, and I hoped he could be successful in stopping wars, addressing the overreach of multiple regulations. I had a support for those who were out of work, and finally, having a fair, humane, and workable immigration policy was really important to me. Equally, I had a lot of criticism towards my own party. We had not paid attention to what was important for way too long. And I think that's why we ended up here. What I didn't expect was this tactic that Trump is using, which is fear, intimidation, and chaos, to enact what should be some common sense solutions. In my argument today, you will hear the words fear and intimidation as the reason he is not making us great again. This is a destructive strategy, and no matter how right he may be about addressing real concerns, this is a primary example of how the ends justifying the means can destroy not only hope for results, but everything in between. We have a beautiful system of government here, 3 equal branches, checks and balances, a credo that states we the people, and we hold these truths to be self-evident. We are equal in the eyes of God. We have rights to self-govern. Our governing process is supposed to take place by politics, by persuasion, and by debate. Only in authoritarian regimes do we see governments by intimidation, threats, violence, and chaos. So if you want to make America great, you must start and stay with American values and principles. But that is not what I am seeing in Trump's America. His chilling effect on the Republican Congress is mind-blowing. I'm 73 and I have never seen a Congress cower to their president like the Republicans are doing. They do not only fear about being primaried, but they also fear the safety of themselves and their families from the MAGA base. Senator Louise Murkowski, a Republican from Alaska, when speaking about the intimidation from her own party, is quoted as saying, "We are all afraid, okay? I am oftentimes very anxious myself about using my voice because retaliation is real." President Trump is loose and loud name-calling specific people with words like traitor and treasonous, and in doing so puts a target on people's backs. He's making a mockery of our judicial system. He is defying court's orders, and his lack of due process is making people afraid, whether they are legally here or not. His actions have made our courts nearly impotent and moot by ignoring and gaslighting court decisions. Courts don't have armies. We count on honorable citizens, honorable presidents and Congresses to obey the laws in courts. So how does this type of defiance make us great again? The double whammy of this is that Trump has perfected the art of love bombing. One moment he is the sweet host of Bill Maher, and the next a rude and aggressive strongman, publicly humiliating an incredibly brave and hardworking President Zelensky. Everyone has flaws, yes, but this crosses lines that are far greater than MLK, JFK, Nixon, Clinton, and even Reagan and Biden's families hiding their cognitive declines.
30 seconds.
Trump's manipulative tactics create what is called cognitive dissonance. We don't know what's real because the narrative is always changing. The result is that we have become exhausted, and the chaos and fear all comes from uncertainty. We exchange our freedoms for comfort of a strong man who will just take care of everything. But in this process, we lose the privilege and responsibility of being participants of this self-governing process. Instead, we become sheep with blinders on. And what we are losing is precious. This is not what we were founded upon, and this is not making us great again. And this matters.
Thank you to our speaker. And questions of curiosity. Let's go to Sam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The speaker mentioned that she experienced a benefit of the doubt sentiment when President Trump was elected, and I'm curious how long that lasted into the presidency and if there were any actions that reinforced that benefit of the doubt early in President Trump's presidency.
Thank you. Yes, I was very excited about the way that he initially approached Ukraine and Russia. I thought that there was a lot of hope there. And I thought that he was treating them equally. It appears that he has not been in recent times where he has really protected the aggressor. And I am very pleased about the possibility of this. Well, they actually have signed an agreement today on the minerals, which is great. But that was a Ukrainian initiative, and it finally got to the point where Ukraine was able to say yes to it again, where Trump had taken it too far. I am happy to see that we have stopped the border influx. I am not happy about how he is treating those who are here legally and illegally and not allowing them due process. I think that some of the things that DOJ can do are good, but and I think regulations, I think it's really important that we address regulations. So those are some of the things, and I think that we may be able to get there with what has happened in DOJ, but there's also a lot of chaos. So many people that I know have been affected by DOJ in very negative ways.
Let us go to Tom.
Good evening. It's my
Oh,
job.
let's go. I'm sorry, Tom Cook for a question.
Sure.
Forgive me.
No problem. The other Tom, raise your hand. Madam Chair, question for the speaker. Is the speaker concerned about making generalizations about presidents like J.B. Pritzker making a judgment that Trump is basically the Nazi regime in hiding? Does the speaker fear that making these generalizations that he's an intimidator and a threatening man, that it is not helping our political environment, which is still very polarized?
To our speaker. Susan? Did we lose Susan?
No, I'm here.
You're
I'm
muted.
here.
okay.
Sorry.
Mhm.
I don't think it's a good idea to use those kinds of words and that kind of language. It's exactly the kind of thing that I am objecting to in President Trump. So I don't like those kinds of languages. It is, and I felt like I was trying to be careful not to put that kind of label on him, but the way that he operates is it is destructive, and it needs to be called out as destructive, because I think it is harming us in a very serious way.
And for one more question, let us go to Trina.
Hi, I probably could ask 3 or 4 questions, but I guess if I just have one question, I'll just ask, are you aware, Susan, that
Is the speaker aware?
Oh, I'm sorry. I
Thank
was
you.
late, so I didn't get the rules of the game or the party.
No worries.
Are you aware that, and maybe
Is the
somebody already
speaker aware?
and
When you're not asking me, but we're asking the speaker. So is the speaker aware?
Oh, okay. I thought I could talk to her directly. No.
That's nope, not in a Brave Rangers
Okay.
debate. Through the chair. Thank you.
Sorry.
No
All right.
worries.
Is the speaker aware that, and maybe somebody already asked this because I was late, is the speaker aware that President Biden bragged about defying the Supreme Court? And is the speaker aware that there's video, lots of video of AOC when Biden was president on like on CNN, on video, saying that Biden should ignore the Supreme Court or any court, that he should ignore court rulings? So, I mean, my point is that
I think that's okay. Good question. Over to the speaker.
You're muted,
Susan. Yeah, Susan is muted.
Muted. Maybe you mute me. Okay. Okay. So no, I don't understand. No, I don't agree with AOC. I don't think that is a good thing to promote, and I don't agree with President Biden when he says he wants to defy the Supreme Court. We are a country of laws, and that is one of the reasons why I do not believe that what President Trump is doing in defying laws, particularly around things like the deportation of people who should not be deported, and then he just says, well, too bad. Then I think that is very dangerous for our democracy.
And with that, our speaker and our questioners are thanked. Okay, everyone, it is that time of the evening. We are going to take a quick break, during which I would like to ask our sponsoring organization, All Sides. I believe we have a representative here.
Yes.
Do we have John? Yeah, John, the floor is yours.
Well, I want to be very short, so we're going to have as long of a break as possible. I just wanted to actually help. All Sides wants to help Braver Angels do this. I think a lot of people here already know All Sides. We invite a lot of people. Hopefully some folks came through our invitations. But for people who don't know allsides.com, I just want to tell you a little bit about, it's very short, and then I'm going to ask you for a favor to help us do something better to help Braver Angels. So just about us, just give you a sense, our mission, it's actually very similar to Braver Angels. Our mission from 2012 is to free people from filter bubbles so they can better understand the world and each other. That's both a brain aspect and a human aspect, relating, listening to each other. And we actually have a very, very, very diverse organization. Like you can look at our site, you can see people from left, center, right. You actually, when we do surveys of our site, we had this equal percentage of Republicans and Democrats coming to our site. And we've got a lot. I mean, through our site and through our different channels, we've had as many as 80 million views a month. So we're catching on, despite the fact we haven't done any advertising outside of me talking like right now, pretty much. what we really hope to do is to help you kind of do what you're doing. So All Sides helps this kind of mission in a lot of different ways. If you go to our site, allsides.com, you'll see news as it breaks, that's covered from left, center, right. So you can get the full picture and issues like that. We do a lot of media literacy. Somebody mentioned media literacy, one of the speakers did, Madam Chair. And that's something we support a great deal. We're being used in all 50 states around the nation. Teachers actually felt that they could use us because we did show the different perspectives. It didn't go one way or the other. So they could actually do that. And we support a lot of dialogue and organizations like Braver Angels and others in the bridging organization to make that a bridging community to help that. Um, what I do want to ask you all to do is if you do go to allsides.com, give us feedback. We want to be able to help you in Braver Angel events and throughout life, be able to see the different sides, understand each other, meet each other, talk about it, and really help collaborate as a nation and build a stronger, more resilient nation, democratic society, democratic republic, or whatever you want to call it, because I know that the word can be controversial, but help us. So go take a look, see what you like, see what you don't like. Click contact us and tell us what you think and how we can make it better, because we really want to do that. So with that request, thank you. And thank you very much, Madam Chair, and also Sam for helping us out.
Thanks, John. Thank you, All Sides. You guys should definitely check them out. If you're here, interested in this debate, as John was suggesting, I think you'll find their content really interesting. So, all right, let's get back to our debate. We'll do 2 more 4-minute speeches. I'm going to start going to fewer questions. But for our next speech in the affirmative, I am looking for Tom Davey. Tom, you have 4 minutes.
Is here.
Excellent.
And first of all, President Trump is doing something that politicians just don't do. He's keeping his promises. Hasn't kept the promise on lowering costs yet, so he's still working on them. But he's kept more promises in the first 100 days than most politicians have kept in their many years and careers. President Trump, whether deliberately or inadvertently, has increased the national debate on the debt, on illegal immigration, and yes, some people are here illegally. You go anywhere else in the world without legal cause, you overstay your visa, they're going to throw you in jail and throw you out of the country. Even if you are a rich American in a poor country, they will do that. He has increased the debate on the border control. And so for the first time in a long, long time, we actually have a secure border. My beloved military is doing an awesome job on 3 dimensions, securing the border. And of course, both border control and fentanyl, he's been so successful with. Even Bernie Sanders the other day mentioned that he was supportive of Donald Trump. So that was still a surprise to me. Now, one of the problems that this is brought up, and several of the speakers today have discussed it, and of course, all throughout the news media in town, I'm here in Washington, D.C., is this attitude that if the federal government doesn't do something, it just won't get done. Well, the federal government is at best a one-size-fits-all solution. Now, for certain things that cross all our borders, space, weather, the military, the federal government is the best place to go. A lot of talk about the destruction of the Department of Education, which I am completely supportive of. It's not that we are anti-education. I think just the opposite. You look at the Department of Education's funding since its creation, and has the Department of Education's funding has increased, the national test scores have decreased. Granted, more people are taking those test scores, so it's not perfect correlation, but the reality is that there is no indicator that the Department of Education has done anything good for our country. Education support, federal Department of Education do not support. Let the states run and fix these systems by themselves. Getting a lot of pushback, both nationally and internationally, from people who have made their living off taxpayers' dollars. And I'm a military officer, so I'm one of those people, military officer and a federal emergency manager. But there are a lot of people who are going to be losing their incomes. But the fact is that we are $36 trillion in debt. We have a 1.8, $1.9 trillion deficit. We simply can't afford all these programs. Doesn't matter whether they're good or bad. We need to look at what are the requirements of a federal government and what does the Constitution say we must do. I would also like to mention that the GOP is not anti-immigrant. We are anti-illegal immigrant. We get it. Even the Native Americans came over from Asia over the Bering Straits 25,000 years ago. So this is strictly a nation of immigrants. But we got to come here legally. You don't start off your life as an American citizen by breaking the law.
30 seconds.
Okay. One of the speakers made the excellent point that 1940s, the world was devastated and the US funded all these great programs, NATO, World Health Organization, the UN. Well, these days, Europe has an awesome economy. The rest of the world can afford to pay their fair share. Trump has never actually said he was going to close down NATO. He just threatened it because Trump's a different person than we're all used to. So we are trying to, okay, 2 more points. First of all, I want to thank President Trump for finally making English the official language. And I want to thank him for working on fixing the global imbalances.
All right, and thank you to our speaker. I see all these hands. Let's see. Let's go to Phil Sanders.
All right. I'm curious if the speaker believes that it's acceptable to deny due process and defy the Supreme Court in the pursuit of policy objectives.
Madam Chair, I would say to the speaker, to the questioner, that as a naval officer, I have sworn to uphold and defend the Constitution. At this, I don't think President Trump has actually defied the Supreme Court. He's damn close, and that does scare me. As far as due process, there's due process. We need to make sure that people we deport are actually deportable here illegally. My preference was to deport the illegals who have committed additional crimes. United States Code sections 1310 to 1330 detail all these activities that are being done both by illegal aliens and by Democratic officials who are supporting them are in fact in violation of federal code. But you ask the due process question is an excellent question. And the fact is that most of these people, I don't feel comfortable saying all, but the vast majority have received due process, not never-ending due process, not 20-year due processes as the Biden-Obama administrations gave us. The question is someone deportable? We don't need to spend 20 years discussing that, which happens in the American due process system. Have I answered your question, sir?
Sounds like a good answer.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, let's go to Jeremy Meyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is around the Department of Education. I'm wondering, is the speaker aware that the primary role of the U.S. Department of Education is around financial aid and funding programs for those who are underserved and poor, and collecting data and ensuring the civil rights of everybody to get an equal opportunity to have education. So if that's your frame, that this is primarily what the U.S. Department of Education does, rather than the work that the states and localities do, which is here's how we're going to do school. Would that change your perspective on
Would that change the speaker's perspective?
The speaker's perspective on the value of having the U.S. Department of Education doing the work around providing aid and ensuring civil rights?
That's a great question. And I would start off a little bit on my background. My mother has, or I guess had when she was alive, a doctor of education. And her first job when I was a child was with health, education, and welfare. She worked for Head Start and, in fact, used her doctoral dissertation to create the Home Start program. So I have a certain emotional attachment to that. However, that was also how many decades ago? 50, 60, 70 years ago. And I am fully aware, and what you consider a good thing, I consider a bad thing, that Department of Education's primary budget item is funding education, both at the primary, college, et cetera levels. If these were actually loans were being paid back, then it wouldn't be an issue, but the loans aren't being paid back. The Department of Education does not seem to be differentiating between a STEM or a medical or a management degree versus a dance degree or a Sanskrit degree.
Last
People
thought.
who get sorry?
Last thought, please.
Okay, so there is no reason a poor person cannot get a school loan from a bank or financial institution, because he would have to pay it back. And if he gets a government loan, it should be paid back anyway. As long as he's got a degree and a work ethic that pays off as a return of investment, everything will be fine. Again, the federal government is not the
last
great
thought.
savior. Done.
Yeah.
Done.
Excellent. Thank you. And with that, our speaker and our questioners are thanked. All right, everyone. Going to another negative speech. I am looking for Doreen. Do I have Doreen Fost?
Boast. Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mm-hmm. You have 4 minutes.
Thank you. Once upon a time, in the 1980s, I was a tourist in Belgium and had the good fortune to stumble upon a free outdoor concert. Chairs had been set up in a grand square in Brussels for what I soon learned was a commemoration of Belgium's liberation from the Nazis in September 1944. The concert was a musical salute to the Allies and included American jazz like Glenn Miller, plus our Allies' national anthems. Now, I lived the first 12 years of my life on an Air Force base, and I was the kid who always teared up when we sang the Star-Spangled Banner. But to be in the Grand Place with hundreds of Europeans rising to their feet for our national anthem, that was pretty emotional. I felt proud, but also humbled to be from a country that commanded such respect and such gratitude. Geography and history endowed the United States with the prosperity and industrial capacity to help win World War II and to help win the peace afterward. But it took more than money. It also took the trust, goodwill, and shared values that led other countries to see the United States as a great nation. I don't think Donald Trump is making America great again. What does it mean to be great anyway? It could refer to the high regard that one has for oneself, but it's also about how others regard you. And it's about the relationships to others. In this case, I think it's about our relationship with our allies and our trading partners around the world. In just 3 months, Donald Trump has undermined our role as a reliable trading partner and a trustworthy ally. Donald Trump has shown a shocking disregard for the sovereignty of other countries, friendly countries. Canadians believe he's trying to break their economy in order to more easily annex them. He refuses to rule out military action to seize Greenland, an autonomous territory of our NATO ally, Denmark, putting all of NATO on edge. And he's threatened to seize the Panama Canal, contrary to the 1977 treaty between the U.S. and Panama. On the economic front, Trump has declared and paused and reinstated and altered and paused again an assortment of tariffs on all of our trading partners, all with shifting justifications. His erratic behavior has affected not just our stock markets, but bond markets, consumer confidence, and potentially the world economy. I don't know about you, but if I had a friend that betrayed me and acted like his own power and interests were the only ones that mattered, I'd start looking for better friends. And that's exactly what's happening. Canada's Prime Minister announced yesterday that he's seeking closer economic ties with the European Union, while Canada and Britain are both negotiating to work more closely with Europe on defense. And the EU recently joined with South American countries to create one of the world's largest trading zones. Japan and South Korea have entered economic talks with China for the first time in 5 years in response to tariff threats. Meanwhile, China has halted exports to us of minerals we need to manufacture electric engines. And the BBC today quoted several Chinese manufacturers who said they weren't concerned with selling their goods to the US anyway because they can sell to other countries, which will be cold comfort to American dock workers and truck drivers when trade from China and elsewhere starts drying up. Until Donald Trump came along, it never occurred to me that anyone questioned America's greatness. But greatness to me requires principled and responsible use of power. If we allow our government to use that power not for the greater good, but to harm those who have trusted us, then we will lose their trust. And if we force the world to turn away from us, we will not be greater, we will be alone, and we'll be diminished.
Thank you to our speaker. Okay, questions. I'm going to take a couple questions. Let's go to Mick McGuire.
Hey, thanks for having me. So my question essentially is to the speaker is, how would you make trade more equal since you don't like it this way?
How would,
would you do it?
since the speaker doesn't.
How would the speaker make the trade imbalance, current imbalance, better? And just as a little background, so I was in Berlin when the Berlin Wall fell. I was in the military when that happened, and I saw how the Germans treated us when we were there. We did a run through East Berlin at the time, and it was like we just liberated Paris. It was exhilarating, it was exciting. And I recently heard that there was a
To the question?
man. Yeah, the question's still the same question. I'm just giving a little context to it.
Sure.
A Pakistani man in England immigrated into England and is there not to become British, but is there to change Britain into that kind of country. So with all this change going on,
this is getting to be a speech. Let's get the answer.
How would you make trade more balanced?
How would the speaker make trade more balanced?
How would the speaker
Thanks for the question. First of all, in some regards, I don't think that trade necessarily needs to be more balanced. We have a trade imbalance because we buy more products from other countries than they buy from us. That's because we have enough money, we are sufficiently prosperous to be able to buy products, but that does not mean that the countries from which we are buying things necessarily should be forced to buy our goods. Now, I recognize that there are some cases where there are countries that have regulations that limit their ability to buy products from us. For example, I believe Canada has a limitation on importing dairy products from the United States in an effort to protect their dairy industry. But I'm not an expert on that sort of thing. I just know that there may be certain regulations where we say, okay, that our government thinks it's unfair for certain products are being blocked from other countries. That I think you handle with negotiations and not with punishing tariffs, and certainly not with kind of tariffs that seem to have been created out of I don't know what by president or by somebody on his staff, where it seemed like they took some apples and divided them by oranges and came up with tariffs. I think the policy that is trying to bring manufacturing back into the United States, that's a valid reason to use tariffs, but it's a process that takes many years and is not going to happen over the next course of the next few months. And certainly if I'm a manufacturer looking to build a factory someplace, I'm not going to invest in a place that's being driven by somebody who's so erratic and creating an environment of so much uncertainty. Does that kind of answer the question?
Let's go to another question. One more. We'll go to Anne in Sparks.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I wondered or Madam Chair, wondered if the Speaker would at all entertain the possibility that President Trump was tongue-in-cheek when he suggested that Canada be annexed and that Greenland become a property of the United States. Just to get them more independent, to get their governments to step up? Can you entertain that possibility at all, or is that completely?
Can the speaker entertain the possibility?
Can the speaker, yes, I'm sorry.
No
the
worries.
possibility.
No, not for a minute. I don't think Canada, I don't think Canadians and Greenlanders and people from Denmark regard it as tongue-in-cheek either. Canadians, their government and citizens, I know people in Canada, I have relatives there, absolutely see it as a threat to their sovereignty. And I'm guessing, without personally knowing Greenlanders, that would be the case there too.
With that, our speaker and our questioners are thanked. So for our next speech in the affirmative, we're going to go now to 2-minute speeches because we're coming close to the end of our debate. So for a 2-minute speech, I would like to go to Edward from rural Virginia.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to speak from the rural American South, where many of our local communities and even whole counties are Black majority communities, where most of these Black folk are Christian. And that is a very meaningful thing to know, since their white oppressors who gave them the Christian message believed in things like sex and labor trafficking, buying and selling children, and ritualized, fetishized, sexualized lynching. So the fact that Black folks in the rural South are majority Christian is very important. I refer to the recent Pew research that identifies that white evangelicals strongly support Trump's actions, and Black Protestants strongly do not support them. This is going to help make America great again, in my opinion, when the veil of the utter wickedness and idolatrous unrighteousness of a lot of white evangelical Christianity is revealed. Because then the consuming fire of the righteous God will show what idolatry is, and a true faith may return to America. Thank you very much.
Thank you to our speaker. Well under time, which means we can take a couple questions. Let's go to Paul.
Hand went up by air.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Let's go to Ryan.
So can I first ask the speaker to clarify the main point?
Well,
the main point. See, okay. So my question is, what does the speaker's point specifically have to do with Trump's policies?
I did say that the Pew research showed that white evangelicals strongly support those policies and Black Protestants strongly do not. Thank you.
Let's go to one more question if we have any. Tom. Tom, you're muted.
Madam Chair, I would ask the speaker regarding the polls, so what and who cares? To talk about white oppressors, you have to go back well over you have to go back over 100 years for slavery, and things have been getting a lot better since the 60s.
Coming to a question.
I'm not necessarily happy with everything my beloved war hero president has done, but I'm tired of Republicans being equated as racist and Nazis by, we'll just say, others to keep it friendly.
May I answer?
Yeah, let's go let the speaker answer the question.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, there's a lot of ignorance about oppression of Black folks. I live in a town where little Black children struck the public school that were segregated long after slavery was ended. And their valiant effort to overcome a white evangelical-driven oppression resulted in the Brown v. Board of Education decision. So I can affirm that in my small rural Southern community, there's still a plenty of white oppression, and a lot of it is coming through white and evangelical theology. Thank you.
That was 70 years ago.
Hey, we're not doing follow-ups. We're running out of time. So thank you for that. We are going to go to our next speech in the negative. And for that, I'm going to go to Shayna. Do I have Shayna? Shayna Bill.
Yes, you do. Thank you.
Few minutes. Shayna, the floor is yours.
Immigrants, the undocumented, and citizens are all entitled to due process under the Fourth Amendment when confronted by law enforcement. On April 19th, the Supreme Court ruled that individuals must be given due process to challenge the removal under the Alien Enemies Act. ICE agents told 51-year-old Elsie Barrios they didn't need a warrant when they smashed her driver's window with a hammer, dragged her out of her car, handcuffed her, and carted her out. Homeland Security declared Elsie a member of the violent MS-13 gang with no evidence. A judge's ruling had allowed Elsie to remain here under an ICE program pending an asylum hearing. When Juan Mendez was surrounded by ICE, the agents called him Antonio, a different man in the building. ICE agents used a pickaxe to break his car window, dragged him out of his car, and handcuffed him and carried him away. In 2019, a judge granted Abrego Garcia withholding from removal status, stating he'd likely face violence and torture if he were deported to El Salvador. Trump deported him to El Salvador, to one of the most torturous prisons in the world. Though the Supreme Court unanimously voted to bring him back, and even though Trump admitted to an administrative error, he won't comply. Homeland Security told Newsweek over 113,000 illegal immigrants had been detained by ICE since January 20th. People with no due process, no contact with family or lawyers, U.S. citizens, people granted legal status, mistaken identities.
30 seconds.
Trump and Homeland Security quote the numbers of so-called terrorists they've made to disappear, but none of the thousands have been imprisoned or had due process. So how do we know? Previous speaker mentions it's okay to deport those who are in violation of criminal code. How do we know that if they've never been accused of any crimes? Trump is violating the Supreme Court orders and shredding our precious Constitution.
Thank you to our speaker. One question. I'm going to go to Hillary.
Sorry, I didn't mean to raise my hand.
Oh, no worries. Okay, Stephen.
Yes, my question, Madam Chair, to the Speaker is whether the Speaker would agree to dissociate the two aspects of immigration, that one deals with the closing of the border and two deals with the removal from the country for people who shouldn't be here. These to me are two separate issues, and I wonder what the grade the Speaker would give on those two aspects of the immigration process separately.
What was the first one, please?
The first one would be the closing of the borders. I mean, the securing the border, making
Okay,
sure
I'm not
that.
talking. I wasn't I appreciate the
No,
question.
I understand. I
wasn't referring. I wasn't referring to closing of the. I wasn't referring to closing of the borders in my talk. And the second question is how I would feel about deporting people who are here illegally. How do we know? They can't contact their attorneys. They can't contact their families. They haven't been accused of a crime. There's no evidence presented against them. They haven't been in court. How do we know if they've committed a crime or if they have legal status here? A lot of the people that have been deported do have legal status here.
And with that, our speaker and questioners are thanked. All right, guys. We are coming to our last round. We're going to do 3 minutes in the affirmative and 3 minutes in the negative. And for our final speech in the affirmative, I am looking for Trina. Trina de la Chapelle. Trina?
Yes.
You have
Hey,
2 minutes.
You pronounced my name well. Thank you. So the way I do believe Trump is making America great again. I don't think, 3 months is enough time. So obviously it's just the very beginning of his administration. But the way I see it is that the Democrats and Biden and Kamala Harris went so far left the last 4 years. They alienated so many Democrats, and I am one of them. I was a lifelong Democrat until 2020. I will never vote Democrat again. They went so far left that it just left me slack-jawed. And I see Trump and his administration and his cabinet as doing a very needed correction of the Democrats' overreach on many, many, many issues. They literally just lost their minds, in my opinion, and a lot of the country agrees with me, including people in the middle, like centrists. For instance, Biden said the whole 4 years that he couldn't do anything about the border unless Congress passed an immigration bill, that he would have to go through Congress. And that's what Democrats were saying all 4 years, why the border, couldn't be more secure is because we need a new immigration bill. It's broken. We need Congress. Well, Trump didn't go through Congress, and look at the border. He didn't need to. Biden could have done executive orders and closed the border.
30 seconds.
As far as the whole concept of gender identity, that comes from queer theory. And Biden and the Democrats embedded it in our society, in federal government. They embedded it without any debate, without any dissent, without going through Congress, without getting women's consent. Complete overreach. And I just feel like the Trump administration is just getting us back to normal. I mean, the Democrats see it as Trump is making us abnormal. I saw the last 4 years as abnormal. And as far as, I'll just say one more thing about Doge. As far as Doge goes, I don't understand why people aren't as worked up when people in private industry lose their jobs. People get laid off in private industry all the time, mass layoffs. And I don't see Democrats getting worked up. Those people's lives are ruined, those people. And yet when a federal employee loses their job, for some reason, that's different. Like, why are they special? I don't understand why they're more special than the rest of us, most of us who work in private industry. If we don't have job security and we have to deal with things like that, why are they special? Why do they fall in a separate category where they shouldn't have to deal with?
Last thought.
So my thought is just that the hypocrisy on the left, I mean, Biden bragged about defying the Supreme Court with his student loan. They told him he couldn't do it, and he said, well, I'm going to do it anyway, and he did. So Biden defied the Supreme Court, and I did not hear Democrats saying there was a constitutional crisis.
And with that, our speaker is thanked. And because of the time, I want to get one more negative speech in. So we are now going to our final speech of the evening, which is Bryson Gardner. Bryson, you have 2 minutes. Close us out, please. Do we have Bryson? Bryson, going once, going twice. Does anyone see?
I see him.
Sorry,
Yes.
can you hear me? Or can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm having internet issues. Can you hear me all right?
Yes. Thank you, Bryson.
All right, sorry. The internet's not great where I'm at. So, so there are a few different things that I wanted to talk about that sort of already got touched on, but there is one thing that I haven't heard mentioned as much that I'll just go ahead and talk about. And that is the removal of a lot of research funding and cuts to funding for universities and scientific institutions, which I find highly concerning. As someone from the STEM field, it's incredibly valuable to the United States' supremacy within the sciences that these incredibly historied institutions get proper funding to perform desired research. Just a few numbers off the top of my head: NIH got cut for $2.3 billion. Columbia got cut for $400 million. Harvard got hit even worse. I think that America being great not only has to apply to our economy or to our culture, but I think that America being great also has to apply to our scientific institutions and our research and the STEM field in general. And I think that a lot of these cuts hurt us incredibly detrimentally. I hear a lot of misinformation regarding a lot of the regarding where these funds end up going. Just As an example, Donald Trump tried to claim that Donald Trump and Doge claimed that research was spent on studying sexual habits for quail under the effects of cocaine. If you actually read the study, you would understand that they were trying to create countermeasures for the effects of cocaine within human beings. I could go on and on with different examples of this, but it is highly concerning. Just as a few other things that I find highly concerning.
30 seconds.
Okay, so just to round it out, I don't think that Donald Trump has done a good job. I think that a lot of other people have talked about the economy and culture and things like that. So I won't go too far into that, but yeah, I'll yield back the rest of my time, I guess.
Thank you very much to our speaker, our final speaker of the night, Bryson. And now, looking at the time, seeing the lateness of the hour, in a few minutes, don't go anywhere just yet because we're going to spend a few minutes wrapping up. But for now, I am looking for a motion to adjourn so people can get to bed on time. Do I have such a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Paul. Do I have a second?
Second.
And with that, I call this debate out of order and adjourned. And now I want to go to arguably the most important part of our night. We have just heard quite a lot of stances with some emotion in there, with some strong disagreement. Did we manage to do what we were hoping to do tonight? So I ask you, what did you learn and what did you enjoy? The chat is open. Please feel free to put your answer into the chat if you prefer, but if you'd like to make a comment on this, what did you learn? What did you enjoy? This is not the time to give a speech that you wanted to give earlier, but for our debrief. Let's go to Joseph.
So I wanted to say that I deeply appreciate the thoughtfulness of people who were in the affirmative, as well as those who were in the negative. I thought there were a lot of points that I had not thought of before that I thought were interesting to hear. I still believe what I believe. And I also wanted to thank Madam Chair for an extraordinary job in managing this debate. I said this to you privately, Jesse, but I just want to say it publicly. I think you have a very special talent, and I look forward to seeing you again in another debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. That's so kind. I really appreciate it. And what you said earlier, you know, I hope that others feel that way. But you're telling us we lived up to what we were trying to do. So if other people disagree, by the way, you can send us negative comments as well. We always appreciate how we can do better. But thank you very much for that. Let's go to Phil Sanders.
First of all, I, as always, really enjoyed hearing from people with a variety of perspectives. In my daily life, I don't hear that variety of perspectives, so it's very enlightening. What I learned is that I feel like as a group, we're maybe not as concerned as we ought to be about the denial of due process and the potential slide into authoritarianism.
Let's go to Sam. What did you learn? What did you enjoy?
Thank you, Jesse, Madam Chair. I enjoyed the fact that I heard from people. I've been to many debates. I work for the Brave Rangers National Debate Team, and I heard from people tonight that I've never heard from before. I'm so thankful and appreciative of the bravery of people who spoke for the first time or asked a question for the first time tonight. Thank you all. I have to second that. Yes, couldn't agree more. I saw a lot of new faces tonight. I hope you'll come back again. We'll have some less contentious topics, but some that are going to be a lot of fun coming up. But I'm glad you guys joined us for this one tonight. Let's go to Suzanne.
What I learned and also appreciated was an understanding, greater understanding, that the majority of people who are in the affirmative are people who are looking predominantly at what. And that there were some speakers who spoke to both the what and the how. And I've always been a how person, but it's been difficult for me to understand how people can adore Trump and what he's done. And yet seeing it through that perspective, the predominance of saying, what do we do? What do we do? I can appreciate that point of view better.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. Thank you to our speakers. That's all on you guys. That is to those of you who shared and spoke freely and fully without fear. Let's go to one last one. Forgive me if I'm not getting to you tonight. Arbitrarily picking Robert Hansen.
I just want to say that it's a very contentious theme, and it really risked people getting, using cuss words or getting overly emotional about it. And I think everyone here handled themselves very well, and so that was nice to see. And we don't see enough of that in America. In our neighborhoods, if we were to bring up, opposing views, before you know it, fists come out, So it's nice. This is a good format where people are allowed to express themselves and everyone's treated courteously. Thank you very much. And great job, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Robert. And again, that's on all of you guys. We do what we can to make it work, but it's the people who care enough to show up. So you guys are what makes this country great. Whoever you think's making this country great again, or as always, I think it's you guys. So thank you so much.